that we have for this session, and I'm really thrilled about it. We have four great voices in this space. We have Don Pitts, president and co-founder of Sound Music Cities, and a few other adventures that he'll talk about. We have Elisa Thoma, who is part of Live DMA. She'll share about her adventures. Diana, you know what? I'm going to mess up your last name because I've never said it out loud, even though we've been talking for a while. Diana Raiselis?
Amazing.
Huh?
That was perfect.
Oh dear. Okay, good. And we met here in Los Angeles, where she was working to get started the LA Nightlife Alliance, and ended up getting a wonderful grant to go to the Berlin Clubcommission. And so she's joining us from Berlin, Germany, correct?
Yes.
And then Renata, is it Gomes? Gomes. And so she's joining us from Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is, I think she's the latest in the time zone group here, where she found us through Max from Groovelist, who is just speaking on another session, and comes to us from DATASIM. So may I have you guys talk amongst yourself and me not be chaperone here, or would you like me to be chaperone? Glad for you guys to talk and talk about all your great work.
Sure. I was thinking a little bit while I know the U.S. was sleeping, most of them. We had a great panel conversation earlier in Europe's Day about strategies from nightlife, and speaking with people from Sydney, Australia, from around Europe and in the UK, and a little bit in the US via video message. But we were reflecting on the I lost my gig movement that was popping up in the very sort of early days of this a few weeks ago. I don't know if this was on folks' radar, but it was this very fast way for people from South by Southwest in Austin, and especially all over Australia, to just record every time a gig was canceled, every time they lost revenue from it. And Jane Slingo from the Electronic Music Conference, I think down there, I want to get the acronyms right, was reflecting on how much that data made a difference in getting policymakers to the table, in beginning to raise a little bit more understanding of the needs of freelancers in this moment, which I think different countries are in different places. And so I guess that made me really happy to hear that a very sort of grassroots, fast and responsive data gathering method seemed to make a difference there. And I guess I'm curious to hear, because we have so many different continents recognized at the moment, what else you all have been seeing that is exciting to you or that feels hopeful to you in data gathering and application right now.
We've got a survey that's out right now, and it's more of a national survey. What we're seeing, as everyone knows, a majority of our ecosystems are freelancers. But what interesting thing we're learning is that the business, when we ask about the loss of income, kind of forecasting it through the end of the year, the musicians are actually less impacted financially than, I mean, obviously than the business owners, and that obviously equates to more income that the business owners are making, and which actually lose more. But we're seeing is a lot of different insights. Unfortunately, our policy in the U.S. is more, I think, locally inspired. Local governments are more responsible or for their own, let's figure out how to get out of this. So I shared yesterday I think the confidence level in federal funding and state funding or help, the confidence in that is extremely low amongst music people.
Can you maybe broaden a little bit, Don, as to what the survey is, and then who it went out to, and just the sort of scope and scale?
So yeah, so one of the frustrations thing, and I've been inspired by a lot of the folks that are on this panel today about really democratizing the research aspect of this music city, music and entertainment ecosystems. And I think, it's really, so what we did is we saw the I Lost My Gig. My friends of mine in Austin started the I Lost My Gig, and there was a debate going on about the same time. Was it too early to calculate the losses? I think there's a lot of stuff that we still don't know. But anyway, we had a couple calls from cities that said, hey, can you help us come up with a survey? And so we were kind of like not ready to do it yet. But I worked with Music Policy Forum. If folks you that don't know Michael Bracey, who kind of heads that up, he's a pretty persistent arm twister. So our team worked on a survey to really design, like, how do we design a 5-minute survey, not a 15, 20, 30-minute survey? Because that's the whole psychology of the respondents that we've been studying for the last 6 months. But so anyway, we developed a free service to cities that wanted to participate. They can either ask the same questions that we ask, and we gave it to them, or we can use our survey as a back of house tool, and then we'll just give them the data for free. So we've got about 6 or 7 cities in the U.S. that are taking it and using it. We just signed up Boise yesterday, but it's, you know, I think it's all free work, but it's the insights that we're getting is pretty telling. And I think locally for us in Austin, there's a lot of these city governments have created funds to help the music and nightlife entertainment ecosystem, but they don't really quite know. There's still a debate on, do they give it to musicians? Do they give it to businesses? Do they give it to whatever? And I think for us, it's finding data for 2 paths: the triage that we find ourselves in, and then how do we position these businesses to at least be in position to come back online in several months.
There's a question in the box from Allison. What cities are participating in the survey? You mentioned some, but
Austin, Dallas, Chicago, New Orleans, Dallas, Chattanooga, and there's other more. They're coming. I mean, we had an email 2 nights ago from the New York City folks who want to participate in it. So,
Elisa, can you share what you guys are up to across all the different venue organizations that you guys work with?
Yes. So LifeTMA, just to give the framework, LifeTMA is a European umbrella organization for live music associations, for national live music organizations, who then represent the venues, the clubs, sometimes also festivals and promoters in their countries and regions. So we have 20 members so far. We usually collect data just to really get the picture of the European live music scene. But we haven't done for COVID. We haven't have a specific survey for the COVID-19 situation. But what we did do is encourage our members to do so and really support them in setting up their own damage, to calculate the damage for their members. So some of them did this on their own, and others were advised by our survey coordinator, Arne G. And yeah, this is what has been happening for us. But then maybe also just to give a bit the picture of Europe, there are so many associations here representing all the different kinds of sectors, and there are so many surveys and going around. And also, we're really feeling that that there is a big need to collect this data. And I mean, it's always necessary to collect the data, to get the picture, to understand the situation, and then really to act and create an action plan also. But now it's just becoming so much more urgent. And what maybe I'd like to mention is what we've been working on with is on a European Observatory for Music, which is a study which is currently in the making. This was initiated by the European Commission, so by the European government, and we really support this as independent body to gather data and analyze the needs of the sector. So yeah, that's it from my side so far.
Renata, what have you been up to? Because you've taken a big, broad stand in this space.
Well, I would like first to start by explaining what is DATASIM. DATASIM is the research study of unity of SIM São Paulo. SIM stands for Semana Internacional da Música. It's an international music conference. We run a lot of content activities, panels, workshops, keynotes, and a very intense showcase and night events agenda. Some people used to call us São Paulo South by Southwest. Maybe it's too much pretentious, but we are working towards that. Our mission as an event is to empowering community, music community, and we've been struggling to do that for almost a decade. And in 2018, Fabiana Batistella, the founder of Sim São Paulo, and Danny Ribas, who's also in the audience right now with us, they found that there was something missing to empowering the community. And the missing link, it was DATASIM. DATASIM, it was this research and analysis study that it was possible to happen because we were involved in the community. And to fight in this moment against the COVID-19 impacts is not only fight for the impacts that this pandemic situation is causing to all the freelancers, as Don has mentioned, but also fight for democracy in Brazil. We have a president who was elected last year that had made such difficult for us in music and culture. The culture ministry was banished. We have a lot of difficult situation here. So gathering data is very important for us right now to broaden the discussions over the challenges that our people have been facing. To briefly present some of the results that our findings have brought, 50% of the respondents, we had something like 500 respondents to the COVID questionnaire that we run, the COVID survey that we run. 50% are freelancers from small companies, micro entrepreneurs. And the policies that government has taken right now only covers big and medium-sized companies. So this makes really hard for people here in Brazil. And we don't really have a strong association when it comes to music and policies. So it makes really more difficult for us in Brazil. The numbers that we have gotten, it was like 8,000 events affected. The survey was done in the first week of the quarantine. 8,000 events affected, almost 20,000 professionals impacted, and a financial loss of $90 million. And this is only a sample, 500 companies. So it's not the total universe. So, but this gives us a very idea of the amount of the impact that the pandemic situation will cause. And we've been able to have our study published by the most popular newspapers, and we are also encouraging some other regional articulators to develop their own questionnaires and surveys also.
And then Diana, you've been doing this in a whole different realm with Nightlife.org and VibeLab. Can you share what you've been doing?
Absolutely. So I'll direct folks to nighttime.org/resources. Nighttime.org is a platform that I have been collaborating with the wonderful gentleman of VibeLab, Lutz Leixenring, who's one of the Berlin Clubcommission board members and executive board member and spokesperson, and Mirek Milan, who's the former night mayor of Amsterdam, to develop something of a platform to collect and share resources and information, and especially best practices from one city to another as things have been developing here. So there's on there, we've just launched this yesterday, there's a map that maps out the 50 plus cities that have some kind of nighttime governance. And I think there is some overlap, but not completely, with conversations around nightlife and conversations around music. I know that they kind of exist in their own conference bubbles, perhaps. But I think there is a tremendous amount of overlap, and I hope that we can keep bridging these conversations and these resources to broadly define what is the music industry, what is the nightlife industry, and so on. So that is all to say, the New York office of Nightlife, Ariel Pallets and her team launched a survey in the early days of this, and Los Angeles Nightlife Alliance, LANA, adapted that survey to their context. And from there, nighttime.org, we've translated it into a few different languages and picked it up. And then that has become available and gone into use in, I believe, Madrid, Montreal. There are a couple cities in Africa, in Brazil, and I think in Portugal as well that are in the process of localizing and working on implementing it. So it's tricky because I think things are changing so very quickly that survey data that made a lot of sense was useful perhaps a few weeks of all of this is now changing and people's needs are changing. And so one of my curiosities, one of my curiosities is for really small grassroots organizations who maybe are a couple people working on a volunteer basis who are able to gather this data, how we can connect them to resources to help analyze or visualize or make this data legible for the mainstream audiences, for policymakers and so on. Because I think this is the big question now of, we can make the survey tools available, people can gather information from their communities, and then what? How does that translate?
Does it help, though, to have had a baseline of information? I mean, to me, that's what Live DMA's actually had, is that there's been wonderful annual data gathering so that there is a place to start with. And I know that's some of Dawn's work and some of Diana's work, is that you've got whether it's what the Nightmares have been collecting or the cities have been working on, so there at least is a starting point. Has that been helpful to look at, even though the data needs are moving?
Go ahead.
No, go on, Diana, please.
So this is something that I think, to acknowledge from the grassroots side of things, this is a real capacity need that I would welcome resources, thoughts, kind of brainstorming together especially for grassroots organizations who have limited capacity. I think the lack of a baseline is sometimes what makes this advocacy so difficult to do, that if there was no capacity before to measure what was there, how do you then talk about what has been lost? And so I'm curious, what are perhaps the easier, the DIY ways to start gathering that data, even retroactively now?
Maybe I can share a bit of our experience here, and just to say that it's not easy, that we've been exactly what you've mentioning, Diana, then really encourage our members and then their members to work on data, to create a story, to do the storytelling with the data towards their municipalities, regional governments, national governments. It's a long process that we've been doing for over 5 years now, and we just start to see the results with several countries now publishing their own survey, like their own survey reports and so on. I mean, there are countries who've been doing this for a long time and who are really strong and very skillful in this, but yeah, it's not easy. And I think that the easier it is, not the easier, but the more simplicity it is, the easier it gets. So we've been doing a survey with only 21 questions, and that's not a lot, but already with 21 questions you get a good deal of indicators that you can work with, and that's what we're doing with our members, and that's already really a big work to collect the data, to correct it, and to analyze it, and to do the storytelling. And yes, we're doing annual survey meetings where our survey coordinators meet and exchange, learn from each other. We're really into this sharing and learning from best practice, getting inspiration from others, and really encourage this with our network. And this is what's the most helpful so far.
I totally, go ahead.
Okay,
Sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I totally agree with the 21 questions. I think, the goal is to really zero in on like what data can we get that moves the policy needle forward. And I think even on the dissemination of the data and the storytelling post, all that is we've been researching kind of the psychological barrier we've been building with these big fancy reports, we've been interviewing a lot of the folks in the grassroots organizations in the cities we've worked in, and they've said, you know, that they don't feel ownership of it. And we asked them, you know, are the recommendations, they're like, the recommendations are spot on. They said, but we just assume that the people or the organization paying for the report or the study is going to do the work. And I think if you read all these studies, the common theme, all the ones that exist, is that the importance of the grassroots community implementing and activating some of these things. So I think the whole paradigm is changing. I think looking back at the 20,000 data sets that we have from the cities we've been in, I think it's a whole different game now. I mean, we were in the U.S., we were about 60% of the folks were saying that their income from music had increased over the last 3 years. I think they were we're just starting to figure out this gig economy. I mean, obviously most of them were working 2 and 3 jobs, but I think it's a different, I mean, I would love to follow up with this group, you know, afterwards and come up with a 20-question survey, like for now, and I'll share the questions that we've had, but and then I think asking these folks in another 2 or 3 months where we're at, because it's a different world. So it's just I'm excited about where we are. So I mean, where we are in the research. I'm not excited about where we are, why we are. So
we were talking at the same time because I think we were synced. I was really going to say something similar that you said, Dawn, so I'll be very briefly. Last year, we had a chance to work with Berkeley and Women in Music USA to develop a survey on women participation in music industry in Brazil. And having the data from abroad to compare, it's really important to build a story and to show the community the differences and how we can improve and learn. Maybe if we work together in a very precise and easy to do questionnaire, it would be great to build this story together.
I think this actually brings up another question for me, is if anyone in your networks are beginning to think about, how we might compare or compile these large numbers of data sets from many different surveys, many different organizations, what the opportunities might be there and how we might be able to address, questions of confidentiality or anonymizing data, because I think there are so many of these stories being told around the world.
Let me put a bridge in that, because I've been in a lot of other conversations that we've got kind of the nightlife conversation, which incorporates other pieces, the music conversation, but then also I know that in the United States, I've been in like 3 conversations with the nonprofit art space and in the Recording Academy. So we have all of these different lenses. So it's not even just city and civic and ecosystem base, but it's kind of stacked levels of other needs and interests. And I find that it's the opportunity is to figure out ways to piece that together. Mm-hmm. But I'm also finding that there's whole groups of people not counted, especially underserved communities, persons of color, tend to not necessarily be in these gatherings. So I don't know if that's things you guys are looking at too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think in our work, it's I think moving forward, I think equity. What we've learned is equity is a enormous area of improvement, and I think it's we've been studying and researching ways to actually, when we do this next phase of research, it's really more looking at the social, kind of the social determinants of health, and how that overlays to the ecosystem, and less industry-ish questions, because we know from our research the last 2 or 3 years that we have a large DIY industry here in the U.S. And so I think we're getting those lived experiences is what we're really needing to pull out, and equity and diversity is a big piece of that.
data has the power to bring this conversation, to rise this conversation, and to, as we say in Brazil, put the finger on the wound and to expose everything and make the subjects that nobody wants to discuss to appear in media and to gather attention from communities, from different communities.
I'm writing that down. My quotes of the day, finger on the wound is definitely one of them.
Yes.
Diana, do you see that as well? Because you represent so many diverse communities with the work you do.
Yeah, I've been reflecting a little bit on the power. I read this amazing long written many times, the restaurateur that runs Prune in New York City. And I think that her story of her decision to close the restaurant, of her writing and thinking about the employees that she had to furlough for that time, the pride in what she's built, I think storytelling has to go along with data. And so to me, I wonder how we can, for people who are maybe not being accessed or being represented in the survey data that we're getting now, how to seek out individual story and give platforms to people who are maybe not included in that data or accurately represented, in order to kind of balance that out a little bit. Because I recognize that we think of data as so objective, and no data set ever is.
I was also just going to comment, as we're coming to the end of it, there was a conversation we were having on mapping Los Angeles back when you were in Los Angeles, and there were many venues that did not want to be counted, and we were joking around about whether we would have them cryptically mapped to the LA County Jail. And so that there's people who do not want to be counted in some of this, and I know in some of Don's work there's been people pushing back as to, why are you counting me? And I'm afraid that you're going to come tax me, cite me, deport me, whatever it is. And so there is a question of who's being counted and for what. And I was just going to say, Amy Schwartzman, who was one of our early in the whole session, What is Resilience panelists, was sharing in the Slack, in the chat about NCAPER is issuing information about data sharing and anonymizing data. My mouth is not moving well. Which comes from the RAND Corporation, from a study that she did after Hurricane Maria of Puerto Rico's impact. So there's other threads here we can continue over in the Slack room as well. We've got about 3 minutes left on this panel, and my closing question tends to be, first of all, y'all get together wonderfully, great people. But how would you like people who are watching this later in the Slack chat or in this call now to reach out to you, and what are you needing right now that they could reach out to you about? If we can just maybe start with Don, and if you could also put your contact information of how you'd like to be reached out to in the webinar chat. Don?
Yes, I can do that. I mean, Don at soundmusiccities.com or soundmusiccities.com or musiccitiestogether.com. But yeah, I would definitely love to follow up and see about getting a consistent across the board surveying questions. I mean, I think I will just quote one of my favorite Irish poets and philosophers: the marvelous thing about a good question is it shapes our identity as much by the asking as it does by the answering. So,
Elisa, what do you need? And how should people reach out to you?
Yeah, I'll just leave our general contact address here, because that goes out to our whole team. Just to say that I'm not the data specialist from our team, it's my colleague Arne D. And well, we're super interested in working with researchers on different studies, because so our survey is quite it's quite a little baby that we still have to feed and have to grow a bit ourselves, and then but we are really open to work with others, maybe on broader studies and other topics. Just as you said, like, how can we really focus also on diversity? Whom are we missing out? And so we're really open on this.
Renata? Oh, you're on mute.
First,
That's why.
sorry, my dog is barking here. First of all, I would like to invite everybody to read news about Brazil and our democracy that is really in danger right now. Right now, I can listen the demonstration. People are on the balcony doing a demonstration right now about Brazilian president. Read the news and please visit us at www.simsaopaulo.com to know about our music event, to be with us and to know about music industry in Brazil. We would like to connect and to gather data and to develop many different adventures with different people from different countries.
Excellent. And last but not least, Diana.
Great. Well, thank you again, Gigi and Storm and your whole team for convening all of us. I think you're starting conversations that I'm looking forward to continuing today. And Vibe Lab has yesterday announced a call for local strategies, good ideas, best practices in service of a global nighttime recovery plan, which Vibe Lab is convening with researchers as well from Harvard, from UPenn, and so on, and beginning to kind of consolidate these recommendations, generate others. And so there's an interest form at that link that folks can fill out and indicate if there's a way you want to be involved, to contribute data or a potential case study, or just to stay updated.
Great. Thank you very much. And I'm going to move this conversation over into Slack.